Ethan Blackwell had built an empire, but the letter in his hands threatened to shatter everything. A child he never knew existed, a past love fighting for her life, and a second chance at the one thing money couldn't buy: family. Could he make up for lost time before it was too late? Before we get into the story, comment below where in the world you are watching from today. Ethan Blackwell stood outside his gleaming office building in downtown Chicago. At 45, he had everything money could buy: a penthouse apartment overlooking the lake, a collection of luxury cars, and a company worth billions. The afternoon sun reflected off the glass tower bearing his name, Blackwell Enterprises. "Mr. Blackwell, your car is ready," said his assistant Nancy, handing him his briefcase. "And don't forget about the board meeting tomorrow morning at 9. Ethan nodded, checking his watch, a custom Swiss timepiece worth more than what most people earned in a year. "I'll be there. Make sure Johnson has those quarterly reports ready." As Nancy walked away, Ethan loosened his tie slightly. Another successful day. Another deal closed. His life ran like clockwork, predictable, profitable, and completely under his control. Until it wasn't. "Sir, can you read this?" The small voice came from below. Ethan looked down to see a boy, maybe 7 or 8 years old, with tousled brown hair and clothes that had seen better days. The child held out a crumpled envelope with both hands. Ethan frowned. Street kids weren't common in this part of the city, especially not right outside his building. Where was security? "I'm sorry, but I'm in a hurry," Ethan said, already turning toward his waiting car. "Please," the boy insisted. "Mom said I had to give it to you myself." Something in the boy's eyes, deep brown, serious beyond his years, made Ethan stop. Those eyes seemed oddly familiar. With a sigh, Ethan took the envelope. Fine. He expected a sob story or a plea for money. It wouldn't be the first time someone had tried an unusual approach to get his attention. The envelope was worn, as if it had been carried around for a long time. No address, just his name written in shaky handwriting. Mr. Ethan Blackwell. He tore it open and unfolded the single page inside. "Dear Mr. Blackwell, I don't want money. I don't want toys. I just want to know why you left us. Mom got sick and she said you were too busy to care. She said you didn't want a family, but I still think about you. And I still hope one day you'll come back. I don't hate you. I just miss you. With love, your son." Ethan's hands began to shake. The world around him, the busy street, the honking cars, the pedestrians rushing past, all faded away. There was only the letter and the boy standing before him. "What's your name?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "Noah," the boy replied. "Noah Williams. Williams." The name hit Ethan like a physical blow. Sarah Williams. It had been nearly 9 years since he'd heard that name. 9 years since he'd walked away from her, choosing his career over what he'd dismissed as a casual relationship. "Where's your mother?" Ethan's throat felt dry. Noah looked down at his worn sneakers. "At the hospital. She's really sick. That's why I had to find you." Ethan stared at the boy, really looked at him this time. The shape of his jaw, the slight dimple in his right cheek, the determined set of his small shoulders, like looking in a mirror to the past. "How did you find me?" Ethan asked. "Ethan, Mom keeps a box with old pictures. I saw your name in the newspaper at the library. They had a big article about you." Ethan's driver honked impatiently. The sound jerked him back to reality. "Noah, I need you to come with me. We're going to see your mother." For the first time since their encounter began, Noah smiled. It transformed his small face, revealing another dimple on the left cheek, just like Sarah's. The hospital was on the other side of town, in a neighborhood Ethan rarely visited. St. Mary's Medical Center was nothing like the private clinics he was accustomed to. The walls were dingy, the floors scuffed from years of use, and the air smelled of disinfectant and illness. "She's on the 3rd floor, Noah said, leading the way with the confidence of someone who had made this journey many times. Ethan followed, his mind racing. A son. He had a son. And Sarah. What had Noah meant when he said she was sick? How sick? And why hadn't she ever told him about the boy? Room 317 was at the end of a long corridor. Noah pushed the door open without knocking. "Mom, I found him," The woman in the bed barely resembled the Sarah Williams that Ethan remembered. Her once vibrant red hair lay thin and dull against the pillow. Her face was pale, her cheekbones prominent under skin that seemed too tight. But her eyes, those green eyes that had once captured his heart, were the same. "Noah, what did you do?" Her voice was weak, but the shock in it was clear. "I told you I would find him," Noah said proudly. "I gave him the letter." Sarah's eyes moved from her son to Ethan. "You shouldn't be here." "Apparently, I should have been here a long time ago." Ethan's voice was strained. He moved closer to the bed. "Why didn't you tell me, Sarah? Would it have mattered?" She tried to sit up, wincing with the effort. "You made your choice very clear, Ethan. Your career was everything. There was no room for me, let alone a baby." A nurse entered the room, interrupting the tense moment. "Mrs. Williams, it's time for your medication." She noticed Ethan and added, "I'm sorry, but visiting hours are almost over." "I'll be back tomorrow," Ethan said firmly. It wasn't a question. Sarah closed her eyes, too tired to argue. "Noah needs somewhere to stay tonight. My sister was watching him, but she had to go out of town for work." Ethan looked at Noah, who was watching their exchange with solemn eyes. "He can come with me." Outside in the hallway, the nurse pulled Ethan aside. "Are you family?" "I'm..." Ethan hesitated. "Yes, I am." "What's wrong with her?" "Leukemia. She's been fighting it for almost a year now." The nurse lowered her voice. "The treatments are expensive. She's already exhausted her insurance coverage, and she's behind on the payments." "Of course, money. The one thing Ethan had in abundance. I'll take care of it, all of it. Just make sure she gets whatever she needs." The drive to Ethan's penthouse was silent. Noah sat in the back seat, his small backpack clutched to his chest, staring wide-eyed at the luxury vehicle. "You live here?" Noah asked when they pulled up to the skyscraper. "I do." Ethan led the boy through the lobby, past the doorman who did. A double take at the sight of the child. The penthouse was all chrome, glass, and modern art, a showcase of wealth rather than a home. Ethan suddenly saw it through Noah's eyes and felt strangely embarrassed. There were no toys, no children's, books, no evidence that this place could ever accommodate a child. "Are you hungry?" Ethan asked. Noah nodded, still taking in his surroundings. "I'll order some food. What do you like?" "Pizza?" Noah's voice was hopeful. "Pizza it is." While they waited for the delivery, Ethan watched Noah explore the living room, careful not to touch anything. He was a well-behaved kid. Sarah had done a good job with him. "So you're really my dad?" Noah finally asked, turning to look at Ethan. The question was simple, but loaded with so much meaning. Ethan swallowed hard. "Yes, I am, though I didn't know about you until today. Mom said you were too busy for us." The words stung, all the more because they were true. 9 years ago, Ethan had been consumed with building his company. When Sarah had tried to talk about their future together, he'd dismissed her. He remembered his words clearly. "I don't have time for distractions. My company has to come first." A week later, she was gone. No arguments, no tears. She'd simply disappeared from his life. And he had let her go, telling himself it was for the best. "I made a mistake," Ethan said, the words feeling strange on his tongue. He wasn't a man who admitted to mistakes often. A very big mistake. The pizza arrived, and they ate in the kitchen. Noah's appetite was impressive, and for the first time since receiving the letter, Ethan felt himself smile. "You have your mother's eyes," he said. "But Mom says I look like you," Noah replied through a mouthful of pizza. "She has pictures of you from a long time ago." The thought of Sarah keeping his photos all these years did something to Ethan's heart, a strange, tight feeling he wasn't used to. Later, as Ethan made up the guest bedroom for Noah, his phone rang. It was Nancy. "Mr. Blackwell, I'm sorry to bother you, but Mr. Davidson is insisting on speaking with you about tomorrow's presentation. He says it can't wait." "Tell him it will have to wait, Nancy. I won't be in tomorrow." There was a pause. "You won't be in, but the board meeting, reschedule it." Ethan's tone left no room for argument. "In fact, clear my schedule for the rest of the week. Something important has come up." After hanging up, Ethan stood in the doorway watching Noah get settled in the too-big bed. The boy looked tiny against the white sheets. "Will Mom be okay?" Noah asked, his brave facade finally cracking to reveal the scared child beneath. Ethan moved to sit on the edge of the bed. "I'm going to do everything I can to help her get better." He hesitated before adding, "I know I haven't been there for you before, but I'm here now and I'm not going anywhere." Noah studied him with those serious eyes. "Promise?" "I promise." And as he said the words, Ethan knew he meant them more than any business deal he'd ever made. The next morning, Ethan woke early. He made calls to his lawyer, his financial advisor, and finally to St. Mary's Hospital. By the time Noah woke up, Ethan had a plan. "We're going shopping, and then we're going to see your mum," he told the boy over breakfast. The shopping trip was a crash course in parenting for Ethan. Noah needed clothes, shoes, books, and a few toys, normal things that any child should have. As they moved through the stores, Ethan found himself learning about his son. Noah loved dinosaurs, hated broccoli, and was good at math. He was in second grade and had a best friend named Kevin. By the time they reached the hospital, Ethan's car was filled with bags, and he had a better understanding of the boy he'd helped create, but never known. Sarah was sitting up in bed when they arrived, looking slightly better than the day before. Her surprise was evident when she saw Noah carrying a new dinosaur toy and wearing new clothes. "What is all this?" she asked. "Dad took me shopping," Noah said, the word "Dad" slipping out naturally. He climbed onto the bed to show his mother his new possessions. Sarah's eyes met Ethan's over Noah's head. "You didn't have to do that." "Yes, I did." Ethan moved closer. "Can we talk? Alone?" Sarah nodded. "Noah, why don't you go to the children's room for a little while? Show the other kids your new dinosaur." Once Noah had left, Ethan pulled a chair close to the bed. "I've spoken to your doctors. They told me about a treatment program at Mayo Clinic that might help. I've already made arrangements." Sarah's eyes widened. "Ethan, I can't afford. I'm paying for everything. The treatments, the travel, accommodations for you and Noah, everything. Why?" The question was barely audible. "Because he's my son, and because..." Ethan struggled to find the right words. "Because I owe you both so much more than this." Sarah looked away. "I don't want your guilt money, Ethan. This isn't about guilt." Well, not entirely. He reached for her hand, surprised at how fragile it felt. "I made the biggest mistake of my life when I let you go. I was too focused on success, on building something that would last. But what good is any of it if I have no one to share it with?" Tears filled Sarah's eyes. "It's been 9 years. You can't just walk back into our lives and expect..." "I don't expect anything," Ethan interrupted, "but I'm asking for a chance to know my son, a chance to help you get well, and maybe someday a chance to show you both that I can be the man you deserve." Before Sarah could respond, the door opened and Noah came running back in. "Mom, Dad, there's a dog in the children's room. Can we get one too?" Ethan and Sarah exchanged a look, surprise, hesitation, and something like hope passing between them. In that moment, with Noah bouncing excitedly between them, they felt like a family for the first time, and Ethan knew that no business deal, no amount of money, no success could ever compare to this feeling. He had been given a second chance, and he wasn't going to waste it. The letter that had changed everything was just the beginning of their story. 2 weeks had passed since Ethan found out about Noah. The guest bedroom in his penthouse had been transformed into a proper child's room, complete with dinosaur bedding, a small desk for homework, and shelves filled with books and toys. Today was moving day. Sarah was being transferred to Mayo Clinic in Minnesota, and Ethan had arranged for a private medical jet to take her there. "Are you sure you packed everything?" Ethan asked Noah, who was stuffing his new T-Rex toy into his backpack. "Yep." Noah zipped up the bag with determination. "Is Mom going to get better at the new hospital?" Ethan knelt down to Noah's level, something he found himself doing often these days. "The doctors there are the best in the country. They're going to try some special treatments that might help her a lot." Noah nodded, his expression serious. "I heard the nurses talking. They said Mom is really sick." A lump formed in Ethan's throat. "She is, but she's also very strong, just like you." The drive to the hospital was quiet. Ethan had closed several major deals in his life, but nothing had felt as important as this, making sure Sarah got the care she needed. When they arrived, they found Sarah sitting on the edge of her bed, already dressed and waiting. She looked pale but determined. "The transport team will be here in 20 minutes, she said, smoothing down the simple blue sweater she wore. It hung loose on her thin frame. "Everything's ready," Ethan assured her. "There's an apartment waiting for us near the clinic. It has 2 bedrooms, so Noah will have his own space." Sarah raised an eyebrow. "Us? I'm coming with you, of course." Ethan said it as if it were the most obvious thing in the world. "I've arranged to work remotely for the next few months." "Ethan," Sarah started, then glanced at Noah, who was exploring the now empty room. "Can we talk in the hallway?" Once they were alone, Sarah turned to face him. "You don't have to do this. Taking care of the medical bills is already more than enough." "I want to be there," Ethan insisted, "for both of you." "This isn't a business trip, Ethan. It's going to be hard. There will be days when I'm too sick to get out of bed, days when the treatments make me feel worse than the disease does." "I know. Do you?" Sarah challenged. 9 years ago, you couldn't even handle a conversation about our future. Now you think you can handle watching me go through this? The words stung, but Ethan knew they were fair. "I'm not the same man I was then, Sarah. Finding out about Noah, it changed everything." Sarah leaned against the wall, suddenly looking exhausted. "And what happens if the treatments don't work? What happens to Noah?" The question hung in the air between them. They both knew what she was really asking. Would Ethan step up and be a father if she wasn't around? "He's my son," Ethan said firmly. "No matter what happens, I will be there for him. You have my word." Before Sarah could respond, Noah came bounding into the hallway. "The people with the special bed are here, Mom." The transport team efficiently moved Sarah onto a stretcher and wheeled her toward the elevator. Noah held her hand the entire way, chattering about the airplane they were about to board. "Have you ever been on a private jet, Mom? Dad says it has movies and snacks and everything." Sarah smiled weakly at her son's excitement, then caught Ethan's eye over Noah's head. There was gratitude there, mixed with caution. The jet was indeed impressive, with plush seating that converted into beds, a small kitchen area, and medical equipment discreetly installed for Sarah's comfort. Noah explored every inch, his eyes wide with wonder. "This is even better than the dinosaur museum," he declared. As they settled in for takeoff, a phone call came through on the jet's communication system. It was Richard Campbell, Ethan's second-in-command. "At Blackwell Enterprises." "Ethan, where the hell are you? The Davidson contract is falling apart and the board is asking questions about your sudden leave of absence." Ethan moved to a private corner of the cabin. "I told you I'm handling personal matters. You've got power of attorney for day-to-day operations." "Personal matters?" Richard's voice was skeptical. "There are rumors, Ethan. Word is you've been seen with a woman and a child. The shareholders are nervous." "The shareholders will be fine," Ethan replied coldly. "I built this company from nothing. A few months away won't change that." "At least tell me what's going on," Richard pressed. "We've been friends for 20 years. Ethan glanced back at Noah, who was showing Sarah a feature of his toy dinosaur. "I found out I have a son," he said quietly. "His mother is very ill. I'm taking them to Mayo Clinic for treatment." There was a long pause on the other end of the line. "I see," Richard finally said. "That's unexpected. Life is full of surprises, Richard. And this woman? Is she after your money?" Ethan felt a flash of anger. "She didn't even tell me about our son until now. She's never asked me for a penny." All right, Richard backed down. "Just be careful, Ethan. You've worked too hard to risk everything on sentiment." After hanging up, Ethan rejoined Sarah and Noah. The flight attendant had just served lunch, and Noah was gleefully devouring a sandwich cut into the shape of a star. "Everything okay?" Sarah asked, noticing his expression. "Just work," Ethan dismissed. "Nothing important." Sarah gave him a knowing look. "It used to be the most important thing to you." "Things change," Ethan said simply, and was surprised to realize how true that was. The Mayo Clinic was as impressive as its reputation suggested. Sarah was settled into a private room with large windows overlooking a garden. The medical team reviewed her records and immediately began discussing treatment options. Dr. Eleanor Chen, the lead oncologist, spoke candidly. "Mrs. Williams, your case is challenging, but there are some promising clinical trials that might be suitable. They're aggressive treatments, but they've shown good results in similar cases." "What are the chances?" Sarah asked bluntly. Dr. Chen glanced at Ethan, then back to Sarah. "Without treatment, maybe 3 to 4 months. With the trial treatment, we've seen remission in about 40% of cases." Ethan felt as if the air had been knocked from his lungs. 3 to 4 months. He just found Sarah and Noah. The thought of losing her so soon was unbearable. "Sign her up," he said firmly. "Whatever it takes." "It's not that simple, Mr. Blackwell," Dr. Chen explained. "There are side effects to consider. Quality of life issues." "It's my decision," Sarah interrupted. She looked at Noah, who was reading a comic book in the corner of the room, oblivious to the serious conversation. "And I'll try anything that gives me more time with my son." Later that evening, after Sarah had gone through her first round of tests, Ethan took Noah to explore their temporary apartment. It was comfortable, but nowhere near as luxurious as his penthouse in Chicago. Somehow, though, it felt more like a home. "Dad?" Noah asked as Ethan helped him unpack. "Is Mom going to die?" The question caught Ethan off guard. He sat heavily on the edge of Noah's new bed. "The doctors are going to do everything they can to make her better. But what if they can't?" Noah's eyes were wide and frightened. Ethan pulled his son close. "Then you and I will face it together. But your mom is fighting hard, Noah. She's not giving up, and neither are we." That night, after Noah had fallen asleep, Ethan sat alone in the living room with a glass of scotch. His phone buzzed with emails and messages from work, but he ignored them. Instead, he found himself scrolling through old photos on his laptop, pictures from nearly a decade ago. There she was, Sarah, young and vibrant, her red hair catching the sunlight as they sat at an outdoor cafe. He remembered that day clearly. It was early in their relationship, before his company had taken off, when he still made time for things like picnics and weekend getaways. He'd been a different man then. Less successful perhaps, but more alive. A knock at the door interrupted his thoughts. To his surprise, it was Dr. Chen. "I hope I'm not disturbing you, Mr. Blackwell. I was checking on another patient in the building and thought I'd stop by. May I come in?" Ethan invited her inside, curious about this unscheduled visit. "I wanted to speak with you privately about Sarah's case," Dr. Chen said, declining his offer of a drink. "The standard treatments haven't been working, as you know. This clinical trial is experimental, but it could work, right?" Dr. Chen's expression was carefully neutral. "It could, but there's something else I wanted to discuss. There's another option, a treatment being developed in Switzerland. It's even more experimental, not yet approved in the US. Then we'll go to Switzerland," Ethan said immediately. "It's not that simple. The treatment is extremely costly and not covered by any insurance. We're talking about several $1,000,000. Ethan almost laughed. "Money isn't an issue, doctor. If this treatment can save Sarah, just tell me where to sign." Dr. Chen studied him carefully. "May I ask about your relationship with Mrs. Williams? The hospital staff has noticed you seem invested in her care." "She's the mother of my child," Ethan replied. "A child I only learned about recently." Understanding dawned in the doctor's eyes. "I see. Well, I'll prepare the paperwork for the referral to the Swiss clinic. It would mean relocating again, possibly for several months." After the doctor left, Ethan made a series of calls to his lawyer, his banker, and finally to Richard. "I need to extend my leave," he told his colleague. "Indefinitely." "Indefinitely?" Richard sounded alarmed. "Ethan, the board won't stand for this. They're already talking about naming an interim CEO." "Let them," Ethan replied, surprising himself with how little he cared. "Family comes first, Richard." "Family?" Richard's voice was incredulous. "You've known this kid for what, 2 weeks? And this woman, you haven't seen her in nearly a decade. Are you sure she's not manipulating you?" Ethan's grip tightened on the phone. "I'm going to pretend you didn't say that. Handle things at the hour. Office or don't. It's your choice, but I'm staying with Sarah and Noah." The next morning, Ethan broke the news to Sarah about the Swiss treatment option. They were alone in her hospital room while Noah was at a therapy session the hospital offered for children of seriously ill patients. Switzerland? Sarah looked shocked. Ethan, that's crazy. We can't just pick up and move to another country. Why not? The treatment there could be your best chance. Sarah shook her head. Do you have any idea how expensive that would be? The treatments here are already costing a fortune. I can afford it, Ethan said simply. That's not the point. Sarah's voice rose slightly. I don't want Noah's life disrupted. Any more than it already has been. He needs stability, routine. School starts again in a month. There are good schools in Switzerland, Ethan countered. And what he needs most is his mother. Sarah turned away, tears welling in her eyes. You don't get it, do you? I'm trying to prepare him for a life without me, moving us around the world, chasing miracle cures. It only gives him false hope. It's not false hope if there's a real chance, Ethan insisted, moving to sit on the edge of her bed. Sarah, please, let me do this for you, for Noah. Sarah looked at him for a long moment. You've changed, she finally said. The Ethan I knew would never have put his life on hold like this. The Ethan you knew was a fool, he replied softly. A fool who let the best things in his life slip away because he was too blind to see what really mattered. Before Sarah could respond, the door burst open and Noah ran in, clutching a drawing he'd made in therapy. Mom, Dad, look what I made. The picture showed 3 stick figures holding hands in front of what appeared to be a house. It's us, Noah explained proudly. When Mom gets better and we can all live together. Ethan and Sarah exchanged a look. Over Noah's head, a look full of unspoken words, hopes and fears. Later that day, as Noah napped in a chair beside Sarah's bed, she finally agreed to the Swiss treatment. Not because I believe in miracles, she told Ethan, but because I can't bear the thought of leaving him so soon. 2 days later, Ethan received another call from Richard. This one was different from the others. The board has called an emergency meeting, Richard said, his voice tight. They're voting on whether to remove you as CEO. On what grounds? Ethan demanded. Abandonment of duties. And Richard hesitated. There's something else. Victoria Gray has joined forces with some of the board members. Victoria, Ethan's ex-fiancée, whom he'd broken up with a year ago after catching her leaking company information to competitors. She'd sworn revenge at the time. Now it seemed she was making good on that threat. She's telling everyone that this sudden family of yours is a scam, Richard continued, that you're being played by a gold digger and her kid. Ethan's blood ran cold. That's absurd. Noah is my son. A DNA test would prove it. That's exactly what she's suggesting, that you get a paternity test. The board is considering making it a condition of you keeping your position. After hanging up, Ethan sat heavily in a chair in the hospital corridor. He'd built Blackwell Enterprises from nothing, poured his life into it. The thought of losing it was painful, but as he looked through the doorway at Sarah sleeping peacefully with Noah curled up beside her, he realized something profound. The company was just a thing. It could be rebuilt. This fragile newfound family was irreplaceable. The next day, as they prepared for the trip to Switzerland, a courier arrived at the hospital with an envelope for Ethan. Inside was a formal demand from the Blackwell Enterprises Board of Directors. Submit to a paternity test within 48 hours or face removal as CEO. Ethan crumpled the paper in his fist. He hadn't told Sarah about the situation at work, not wanting to add to her worries. But now decisions had to be made. That evening, as they sat in Sarah's room making plans for Switzerland, Ethan finally broached the subject. There's something I need to tell you both, he began, looking from Sarah to Noah. My company. There are some people there who aren't happy about me taking time away. Because of us? Noah asked, his eyes wide with concern. Not because of you, Ethan assured him quickly. Because they don't understand what's important. What are they going to do? Sarah asked, sensing there was more to the story. Ethan took a deep breath. They want proof that Noah is really my son. A DNA test. Sarah's face flushed with anger. That's outrageous. After all these years, they think I'd lie about something like this? It's not about you, Ethan explained. It's about control. They think they can use this to force me to come back. And will you? Sarah's voice was quiet. If they threaten your company? Ethan looked at Noah, who was watching the conversation with solemn eyes. "No," he said firmly. "Some things are more important than business." "But your company," Sarah began. "Is just a company," Ethan finished. "It can be rebuilt. Us, can't." Noah climbed onto Ethan's lap, something he'd started doing more frequently lately. "Does this mean you're still coming to Switzerland with us?" "Wild horses couldn't keep me away," Ethan promised, hugging his son close. That night, after Noah had fallen asleep, Sarah found Ethan on the small balcony of her hospital room, staring out at the lights of the city. "You'd really give up your company for us?" she asked, joining him at the railing. "In a heartbeat," Ethan replied without hesitation. Sarah studied his face in the moonlight. "The Ethan I knew 9 years ago would never have said that. The Ethan you knew 9 years ago was an idiot," he said with a sad smile. "It took a letter from a small boy to make me see what really matters in life." Sarah leaned against him, and he wrapped an arm around her shoulders. For a moment they stood there in comfortable silence, looking out at the night sky. "I never stopped loving you," Sarah whispered. "Even when I hated you for leaving, a part of me still loved you." Ethan turned to face her, hardly daring to believe what he was hearing. "Sarah, I'm not saying it will be easy," she continued. "We have a lot of history, a lot of hurt between us, and I don't know how much time I have left." "Don't talk like that," Ethan interrupted. "The doctors in Switzerland are the best in the world." Sarah placed a finger on his lips. "Let me finish. I don't know what the future holds, but I know I want you in it, whatever time I have left. Not just for Noah, but for me too." Ethan gently took her face in his hands and kissed her. It was a kiss 9 years in the making, tender, reverent, full of regret for lost time and hope for what might still be. As they broke apart, Sarah smiled up at him. "I think it's time we told Noah the truth, that we're going to try to be a real family." From the doorway came a small voice. "I already knew that." They turned to see Noah standing there in his dinosaur pajamas, a sleepy smile on his face. "I knew it from the day Dad read my letter." Ethan and Sarah exchanged a look of surprise, then both laughed. Ethan held out his arms and Noah ran to them. The three embraced, a family formed through hardship and hope, bound by a love that had never truly died. As they stood there together, Ethan made a silent promise. Whatever challenges lay ahead, the battle for his company, Sarah's illness, the journey to Switzerland, they would face them together. Because nothing, not even his lifelong ambition, could compare to the joy of having found his way back to where he truly belonged. The Swiss Alps rose majestically outside the window of their rented chalet. It had been 3 weeks since they'd arrived in Zurich, and Sarah had already begun the experimental treatment at the Hoffman Clinic. Ethan stood at the window, coffee cup in hand, watching Noah build a snowman in the front yard. The boy had adapted to their new surroundings with remarkable resilience, already picking up a few German phrases from his tutor, who came 3 times a week. "He's a natural with languages," said Sarah, joining Ethan at the window. She was wrapped in a thick robe, her hair covered by a colorful scarf. The treatments had caused her to lose most of her hair, but her eyes still shone with the same determination. "Just like his mother," Ethan replied with a smile. "I remember how you used to correct my French when we traveled to Montreal." Sarah laughed softly. "Your accent was terrible." "It still is," Ethan admitted. He glanced at his watch. "Your appointment is in an hour. Should I call Noah in to get ready?" Sarah shook her head. "Let him play a little longer. Dr. Hoffman said my blood work is showing improvement. The treatment might actually be working, Ethan." Hope. It was something they had been afraid to feel, but lately it had begun to creep back into their lives. Dr. Hoffman, the renowned oncologist who had developed the experimental treatment, was cautiously optimistic about Sarah's response. Ethan's phone buzzed in his pocket. A text from Richard. The messages had become less frequent over the past weeks, especially after Ethan had made his decision official. He'd resigned as CEO of Blackwell Enterprises, keeping only his position on the board and his majority share ownership. The business world had been shocked. Financial magazines ran headlines like "Blackwell abandons empire for love" and "Family over fortune, billionaire's shocking choice." Ethan hadn't read any of them. "Is that work again?" Sarah asked, noticing his distraction. Just, Richard, the transition is going smoothly. Ethan put the phone away. Douglas Reynolds is doing well as interim CEO. Sarah studied his face. Do you regret it? Giving up the company you built? Not for a second, Ethan replied honestly. The company was just a thing. You and Noah are... What matter? Sarah leaned against him, and he wrapped an arm around her shoulders. These quiet moments had become precious to them. Mom, Dad, look how big my snowman is, Noah called from the yard, waving enthusiastically. It's amazing, honey. Sarah called back. Then more quietly to Ethan, I never thought I'd see this, you and Noah together. Sometimes I feel like I'm dreaming. If it's a dream, I don't want to wake up, Ethan said, kissing the top of her head. The Hoffman Clinic was a marvel of modern medical design, all glass, steel, and warm wood, nestled against the mountainside. As Sarah underwent her treatment, Ethan and Noah waited in the family lounge, playing a game of chess that Noah was surprisingly good at. Checkmate, Noah declared triumphantly, moving his queen into position. Ethan stared at the board in disbelief. Where did you learn to play like that? Mom taught me, Noah said proudly. She said chess helps you think 3 steps ahead. She was right about that, Ethan replied, resetting the board. Your mother is a very smart woman. Is that why you loved her? Noah asked with a child's directness. The question caught Ethan off guard. That was part of it, he admitted. She was also kind and funny, and she saw things in me that I didn't see in myself. And do you love her now? Noah pressed, his brown eyes so like Ethan's own, watching intently. Yes, Ethan said without hesitation. Very much. Noah nodded, satisfied. Good. Because she loves you too, she told me so. Before Ethan could respond, Dr. Hoffman entered the lounge. His expression was serious, but there was a hint of a smile playing at the corners of his mouth. Mr. Blackwell, may I speak with you? Privately, Ethan's heart raced. Is everything okay? Yes, Dr. Hoffman assured him quickly. In fact, I have some promising news, but perhaps it's best if we speak in my office. Ethan arranged for one of the clinic's childcare workers to stay with Noah, then followed Dr. Hoffman to his office where Sarah was already waiting. She looked tired but alert, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. I've just received the latest test results, Dr. Hoffman began, taking a seat behind his desk. And I'm pleased to say that the treatment is working even better than we hoped. The cancer cells are responding remarkably well. Sarah's hand flew to her mouth. What does that mean exactly? It means that if this trend continues, we could be looking at a significant remission, Dr. Hoffman explained. Not a cure. I want to be very clear about that. This type of leukemia can return, but it means potentially years of good health, not months. Tears sprang to Sarah's eyes. Ethan moved to kneel beside her chair, taking her hand in his. It's the best possible news, Dr. Hoffman continued. Of course, we'll need to continue the treatment protocol for at least another 2 months, and you'll require regular follow-ups. After that, whatever it takes, Ethan said firmly. Later, as they drove back to the chalet with Noah chattering excitedly about his plans to build an even bigger snowman, Sarah turned to Ethan. I was afraid to hope, she admitted quietly. I was so sure I wouldn't have enough time. We have time now, Ethan assured her, reaching across to squeeze her hand. Time to build a life together. That evening, after Noah had gone to bed, Ethan and Sarah sat by the fireplace talking about the future, something they'd been afraid to do until now. We could stay in Switzerland until the treatments are complete, Ethan suggested. Or we could go back to the States, anywhere you want. What about your company? Sarah asked. Now that I'm getting better, maybe you should reconsider your resignation. Ethan shook his head. That chapter of my life is closed. Besides, I've been thinking about something new. New? Sarah raised an eyebrow. A foundation, Ethan explained, his eyes lighting up with enthusiasm. For families dealing with serious illnesses, to help with medical costs, housing near treatment, centers, educational support for the children, all the things we've been fortunate enough to afford. Sarah's expression softened. That sounds wonderful, Ethan. You could help run it, he suggested. Once you're stronger, your experience as a social worker would be invaluable. Before Sarah could respond, Ethan's phone rang. The screen showed Richard's name. You should take it, Sarah encouraged. It might be important, Ethan answered reluctantly. Richard, it's late here. What's so urgent? Richard's voice was tense. Victoria Gray has called an emergency board meeting. She's making a play for your shares, Ethan. She's aligned with several major shareholders and is claiming that your personal situation has compromised your judgment. She can't force me to sell, Ethan replied, frowning. No, but she can make things very difficult. She's also threatening to go to the press with some story about improprieties during your tenure as CEO. That's ridiculous. There were no improprieties. We both know that, but a scandal, true or not, could hurt the company's stock. The board is nervous. Sarah was watching Ethan's face with concern. After he hung up, he explained the situation. This Victoria, she was your girlfriend? Sarah asked. Ex-fiancée, Ethan corrected. We broke up over a year ago when I discovered she was leaking company information to competitors. Now she's out for revenge, Sarah sighed. I feel like I've stepped into a soap opera. Despite the serious situation, Ethan laughed. Welcome to the corporate world. Backstabbing and betrayal are practically in the job description. So what are you going to do? Ethan considered the question. I should probably go back to Chicago for the board meeting, just long enough to put this fire out. Sarah nodded slowly. I think that's wise. Noah and I will be fine here for a few days. I don't want to leave you, Ethan admitted. Not when we've just gotten good news. It's only for a short time, Sarah reassured him. And your company is still important, Ethan. Not as important as family, but it's part of your legacy. You should protect it. The next morning, Ethan booked a flight to Chicago, while Sarah explained to Noah that Dad had to go away on business for a few days. But you're coming back, right? Noah asked, his eyes wide with concern. Absolutely, Ethan promised. Nothing could keep me away from you and your mom. Sarah walked Ethan to the door when the taxi arrived to take him to the airport. Be careful. With Victoria, she warned. She sounds dangerous. I've dealt with worse, Ethan assured her, pulling her close for a kiss. I love you, Sarah Williams. I love you too, she replied. Now go save your company, so you can come back to us. The flight to Chicago gave Ethan time to think and plan. By the time he landed, he had a strategy in mind. Richard was waiting for him at the airport, looking stressed and tired. Thank God you're here, Richard said as they walked to the car. The board meeting is tomorrow morning. Victoria has been busy in your absence, making allies and spreading rumors. What kind of rumors? Ethan asked. Richard hesitated. That Sarah is a gold digger who trapped you with a kid who might not even be yours, that you've had some kind of breakdown and aren't fit to lead the company anymore. Ethan's jaw tightened. And people believe this nonsense? Some do. Victoria can be very convincing. The Blackwell Enterprises headquarters looked exactly as Ethan had left it, a gleaming tower of glass and steel in downtown Chicago. As he walked through the lobby, employees stopped to stare and whisper. The prodigal CEO had returned. His office had been maintained in his absence, everything just as he'd left it. Ethan sat behind his desk, running his hands over the familiar surface. It felt like a lifetime ago that this room had been the center of his world. A knock at the door interrupted his thoughts. It was Jessica, his longtime assistant. Mr. Blackwell. It's so good to have you back, she said with genuine warmth. You have several messages and Ms. Gray has requested a meeting before tomorrow's board session. I bet she has, Ethan muttered. Tell her I'm available now if she wants to talk. Victoria arrived 20 minutes later, looking as polished and calculating as ever, in a designer suit and killer heels. Her cold smile didn't reach her eyes. Ethan, darling, she purred. How's family life treating you? I hear Switzerland is lovely this time of year. Cut the act, Victoria, Ethan replied flatly. Richard told me what you're up to. Victoria's smile hardened. Business, Ethan, just business. You taught me that, remember? Never let personal feelings interfere with a good deal. And what exactly is the deal you're after? Ethan asked. My shares, control of the company? Both, Victoria admitted without shame. You walked away, Ethan. Someone needs to step in and protect what you built. I didn't walk away, Ethan corrected her. I stepped back temporarily to handle a family matter. Victoria laughed. A family matter with a woman you haven't seen in nearly a decade, and a child you didn't know existed until a few months ago. Please. Noah is my son, Ethan said firmly. And Sarah is… What? Victoria interrupted. Your girlfriend? Your wife? What exactly is she to you, Ethan? The question struck him with unexpected force. What was Sarah to him? The mother of his child, certainly. The woman he loved, without question. But they had never defined their relationship since reconnecting. That's none of your business, he finally replied. Victoria's smile turned triumphant. That's what I thought. You're throwing away everything you've worked for on a fling. A desperate woman who conveniently remembered you existed when she ran out of money. Ethan's temper flared. You don't know anything about Sarah or our situation. I know enough, Victoria countered, and so will the board by tomorrow morning. After she left, Ethan called Richard back to his office. We need to neutralize Victoria before the board meeting, he said, pacing the room. She's going to try to paint Sarah as a gold digger and me as a fool. What do you want me to do? Richard asked. Ethan stopped pacing. Get me everything you can on Victoria's business dealings over the past year. And I mean everything. I have a feeling she didn't stop at leaking information when we were together. The rest of the day was a whirlwind of meetings and phone calls. By evening, Ethan had spoken to most of the board members individually, explaining his situation and assuring them of his continued commitment to the company, even if he wasn't serving as CEO. That night he called Sarah from his penthouse, which felt strangely empty and cold after their cozy chalet. How did it go? Sarah asked. The board meeting is tomorrow, Ethan explained. Victoria is determined to cause trouble, but I think I've got most of the board on my side. I'm sorry for all this disruption to your life, Sarah said softly. Don't be, Ethan insisted. You and Noah are the best things that ever happened to me. Speaking of which, is he still awake? Just fell asleep, but he made me promise you'd call him in the morning before school. I will, Ethan promised. Then, after a brief hesitation, Sarah, there's something I want to ask you. What is it? Ethan took a deep breath. When this is all sorted out and I'm back in Switzerland, will you marry me? There was a silence on the other end of the line. Ethan, Sarah finally said, her voice choked with emotion. Is this because of what's happening with your company? Because you feel you need to prove something? No, Ethan said firmly. It's because I love you. Because I should have asked you 9 years ago, and I've regretted not doing it every day since. Because I want us to be a real family. You, me, and Noah. Yes, Sarah whispered. Yes, I'll marry you. Ethan felt a weight lift from his shoulders. I don't have a ring yet, he admitted. This wasn't how I planned to ask. I wanted to do it properly, down on one knee. You can do that when you get back, Sarah said, laughing through tears. This isn't exactly a conventional romance anyway. After they hung up, Ethan sat looking out at the Chicago skyline, feeling more certain than ever about his priorities. Whatever happened at tomorrow's board meeting, he had already won what truly mattered. The next morning, Ethan arrived at Blackwell Enterprises early. Jessica handed him a folder as he walked in. The information you requested on Ms. Gray, she said discreetly. Thank you, Jessica. Has everyone arrived for the meeting? Almost everyone. The board members are gathering in the conference room now. Ethan reviewed the contents of the folder quickly, his expression darkening. When he entered the boardroom, all conversation ceased. Victoria sat at the far end of the table, looking confident and poised. Ethan, she greeted him with false warmth. So good of you to join us. Victoria. Ethan nodded curtly, then addressed the room. Ladies and gentlemen, I understand there are concerns about my recent absence and the future of Blackwell Enterprises. Concerns is putting it mildly, said Harold Jenkins, one of the older board members. You abandoned your post without warning, Ethan. I took a leave of absence to address an urgent family matter, Ethan corrected. A matter that I'm pleased to say is resolving positively. My son's mother is responding well to treatment, and I've just asked her to marry me. Murmurs spread around the table. Victoria's smile faltered slightly. That's wonderful news, Ethan, said Martha Donovan, another board member. But it doesn't address the leadership vacuum your absence has created. I agree, Ethan said, surprising them, which is why I fully support Douglas Reynolds continuing as CEO. I will remain on the board, and as majority shareholder, but my active management of day-to-day operations has ended." Victoria leaned forward. "And we're supposed to trust your judgment now? When you've thrown away your career for a woman who appeared out of nowhere with a child she claims is yours. A woman who conveniently remembered your existence when she needed money for medical treatments." The room fell silent. Ethan looked at Victoria coldly. "Sarah never asked me for money," he stated. "In fact, she tried to refuse my help initially. And Noah is unquestionably my son. We've done the DNA test that proves it." Victoria seemed momentarily thrown but quickly recovered. "Even so, my judgment is perfectly sound," Ethan interrupted. "Unlike yours, Victoria." He opened the folder Jessica had given him and pulled out several documents. "These are records of stock trades made from an account in the Cayman Islands, an account that, interestingly enough, is linked to a shell company owned by Victoria." The board members glanced at each other in confusion. "The trades show a pattern," Ethan continued. "Victoria has been shorting Blackwell Enterprises stock, betting against the company even while serving on its board." Victoria's face drained of color. "That's a lie." "The SEC might disagree," Ethan replied calmly, passing copies of the documents to each board member. "This is a clear conflict of interest, possibly even insider trading." The room erupted in shocked exclamations. Harold Jenkins turned to Victoria with a thunderous expression. "Is this true?" Victoria's composure cracked. "I can explain." "Save it for your lawyer," Ethan cut in. "I've already forwarded these documents to the SEC. Now, unless there's any other business to discuss, I have a plane to catch. My family is waiting for me." The flight back to Switzerland seemed much shorter than the journey to Chicago. Ethan's mind was at peace for the first time. In years, he had protected his company, neutralized Victoria's threat, and most importantly, he was returning to Sarah and Noah, his true home. When the taxi pulled up to the chalet, Noah came running out into the snow, with Sarah following more. Slowly, "Dad, you're back." Noah launched himself into Ethan's arms. Ethan hugged his son tightly. "I told you I would be." Over Noah's head, his eyes met Sarah's. She looked beautiful standing there in the snow, her cheeks flushed with cold and happiness. "Welcome home," she said softly. Ethan set Noah down and approached Sarah, pulling a small velvet box from his pocket. "I promise to do this properly," he said, kneeling in the snow before her. "Sarah Williams, will you marry me?" Sarah's eyes filled with tears. As Ethan opened the box to reveal a stunning emerald ring, the same shade of green as her eyes. "Yes," she whispered. "1,000 times yes." As Ethan slipped the ring onto her finger and rose to kiss her, with Noah cheering beside them and the Swiss Alps towering majestically in the background, he knew with absolute certainty that he had finally found what truly mattered in life. The letter that had changed everything had led him here, to love, to family, to a happiness deeper and more meaningful than anything he had known before. And he would be forever grateful for that crumpled envelope handed to him by a small, brave boy on an ordinary day that turned out to be the most important day of his life. 6 months had passed since that snowy day in Switzerland when Ethan had proposed to Sarah. Spring had arrived in Chicago, bringing new beginnings in more ways than one. The Blackwell family, as they were now officially known following a simple courthouse wedding 3 months ago, had moved back to the United States. Not to Ethan's sterile penthouse, but to a warm, spacious home in the suburbs with a backyard where Noah could play and a garden Sarah was eager to plant. "Dad, look what I found." Noah called from the yard, running toward Ethan with something cupped carefully in his hands. Ethan looked up from the patio table where he'd been reviewing plans for the Blackwell Family Foundation, his new passion project. "What is it, buddy?" Noah opened his hands to reveal a tiny bird with a damaged wing. "He can't fly. Can we help him?" Sarah joined them, wiping her hands on her gardening apron. Her hair had grown back, now cropped in a stylish shortcut that framed her face. The color had returned to her cheeks, and her latest tests showed continued remission. "We need to be very gentle with him," Sarah said, carefully examining the bird. "Let's call that wildlife rehabilitator Dr. Chen recommended." As Sarah took Noah inside to make the call, Ethan marveled at how much his life had changed in less than A year. From a solitary, work-obsessed CEO to a husband and father whose calendar now included little league games and family movie nights. His phone buzzed with a text from Richard. Board approved the foundation funding. Congratulations, Ethan smiled. The Blackwell Family Foundation was becoming a reality. Using a significant portion of his fortune, they would help families dealing with serious medical crises, covering costs insurance wouldn't, providing housing near treatment facilities, and supporting children through the trauma of a parent's illness. Sarah would serve as the foundation's director, once it was fully operational, bringing her social work background and personal experience to the role. It was the perfect next chapter. For both of them. The wildlife lady said she'll come pick up the bird, Noah announced, returning to the patio. She says I did the right thing by not trying to feed it. You're a natural caretaker, Ethan praised his son, just like your mom. Noah beamed at the compliment. Ms. Johnson says I'd make a good doctor someday. Ms. Johnson has great insight, Sarah agreed, referring to Noah's third-grade teacher. You'd make an excellent doctor. The doorbell rang, interrupting their conversation. That must be the wildlife rehabilitator, Sarah said, heading inside to answer it. But when she returned to the patio, her expression was troubled. Ethan, it's Victoria Gray. Ethan stood up immediately. What is she doing here? She says she needs to speak with you. Something about the SEC investigation. After Victoria's attempt to take over Blackwell Enterprises had failed, the Securities and Exchange Commission had opened a formal investigation into her trading activities. Last Ethan had heard, she was facing serious charges. Noah, why don't you take the bird inside and prepare a box for it like the lady explained on the phone? Ethan suggested. Once Noah had gone. Inside, Ethan turned to Sarah. You don't have to be part of this, I can handle Victoria. Sarah took his hand. We're a family now. We handle things together. Victoria was waiting in the living room, looking far less polished than the last time Ethan had seen her. Her designer suit had been replaced by a simple blouse and pants, and her once perfect hair showed signs of neglect. What do you want, Victoria? Ethan asked coldly. Victoria's usual confidence was noticeably absent. The SEC is offering me a deal. If I provide information about others involved in the insider trading scheme, they'll reduce the charges against me. That's between you and the SEC, Ethan replied. It has nothing to do with me. It does, actually. Victoria glanced at Sarah, then back to Ethan. One of the people involved was Martin Collins. Ethan frowned. My former CFO. He retired 2 years ago. He didn't just retire, Victoria explained. He was cooking the books for years. I found out and used the information. Sarah stepped forward. Why are you telling us this now? Because the investigation is going to uncover everything, Victoria said. And when it does, Blackwell Enterprises stock will take a massive hit. I thought you should know, Ethan. Despite everything, I never wanted to destroy the company. Ethan's mind raced with implications. If what Victoria was saying was true, the foundation's funding could be at risk, not to mention thousands of jobs. I'll have the financial team do a complete audit, Ethan said. Thank you for the warning. Victoria nodded, then turned to leave. At the door, she paused and looked back at Sarah. You know, I was wrong about you. I thought you were after his money, but now I see what Ethan saw in you. After Victoria left, Ethan immediately called Richard to explain the situation. We need to get ahead of this, he told his friend. Full disclosure, complete cooperation with the SEC. Sarah watched him with concern. How bad could it be? If Martin was falsifying financial reports, it could mean significant penalties, maybe even restructuring. But the company will survive, Ethan assured her. I'm more worried about the foundation. If we have to redirect funds to shore up the company. Sarah placed a hand on his cheek. The foundation can wait if it needs to. We'll figure it out. Noah appeared from the kitchen, carefully carrying a shoebox lined with a soft cloth. The bird's all ready for the rescue, lady, he announced. Looking at his son's earnest face, Ethan felt a surge of determination. Whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them as a family. The next few weeks were a whirlwind of activity. Ethan worked closely with the board and the SEC investigators to uncover the full extent of Martin Collins's fraud. The news eventually broke in the financial press, And as Victoria had predicted, Blackwell Enterprises stock took a significant hit. But Ethan's quick action and transparent approach helped limit the damage. By implementing new financial controls and bringing in respected outside auditors, he began to rebuild investor confidence. The foundation's launch would have to be delayed, but Ethan and Sarah used the time to refine their vision and build partnerships with hospitals and social service agencies. "It's actually a blessing in disguise," Sarah told Ethan one evening as they sat on their porch swing. "This gives us time to really get the foundation right from the beginning." Ethan squeezed her hand. "You always see the silver lining." "One of us has to," she teased. Inside the house, Noah was on the phone with Dr. Hoffman in Switzerland, getting an update on the bird they had rescued. The wildlife rehabilitator had been so impressed with Noah's care that she had promised to keep him informed of the bird's recovery. "The cancer's like a bad guy hiding in your body," they overheard Noah explaining to the rehabilitator. "But the medicine is like a superhero that finds the bad guys and zaps them. That's what happened with my mum." Sarah leaned her head on Ethan's shoulder. "He's going to be a doctor. I can feel it." "Whatever he wants to be, we'll support him," Ethan replied. The next day brought unexpected news. Douglas Reynolds, who had been serving as CEO of Blackwell Enterprises, requested an emergency meeting with Ethan. "The board wants you back," Douglas told him bluntly when they met at the company headquarters, "temporarily at least, to guide us through this crisis." Ethan was surprised. "I thought you were handling things well." "I was before this scandal broke. But the shareholders trust you, Ethan. They know you'll put the company's interests first." "My family comes first now," Ethan corrected him, "but I'll help however I can without taking on the CEO role again." Later, as Ethan discussed the situation with Sarah, she surprised him with her response. "Maybe you should do it," she suggested. "Take back the CEO position temporarily. But the foundation, our family time, will still be there," Sarah assured him. "Ethan, you built that company. You care about the people who work there. And if helping Blackwell Enterprises recover means we can make the foundation even stronger in the future, isn't that worth it?" Ethan studied his wife's face. "You're really okay with this?" "I'm not saying it will be easy," Sarah admitted, "but we're a team now. We'll make it work." And so, 3 days later, Ethan found himself back in the CEO's office at Blackwell Enterprises. But this time, family photos adorned his desk, Sarah and Noah smiling from silver frames that reminded him of what truly mattered. His first act was to call a company-wide meeting to address the scandal head-on. In the large auditorium, facing hundreds of employees whose livelihoods depended on the company's survival, Ethan spoke from the heart. "Mistakes were made," he acknowledged. "Not by most of you, but by those in positions of trust who abused that trust. Now we all have to deal with the consequences. But I promise you this, Blackwell Enterprises will emerge from this crisis stronger and more ethical than before." Richard, standing at the back of the room, gave him an encouraging nod. "I'm back as your CEO, but only temporarily," Ethan continued. "My goal is to stabilize the company, implement new safeguards, and then return to my family and our foundation work. In the meantime, I'm counting on each of you to help rebuild what was damaged." The response was overwhelmingly positive. Employees who had feared for their jobs left the meeting with renewed hope and purpose. For the next 3 months, Ethan worked tirelessly to right the ship. He restructured the financial department, cooperated fully with regulators, and personally reached out to major clients to maintain their confidence. Sarah supported him every step of the way, taking on more responsibilities with Noah and continuing to plan for the foundation's eventual launch. They made a point of protecting family dinners and weekend activities, ensuring that Noah never felt neglected, despite Ethan's increased workload. "I miss having you home all the time," Noah admitted one night as Ethan tucked him in. "But Mom says you're helping a lot of people keep their jobs." "That's true," Ethan said, "but this is temporary, buddy. And no matter how busy I am at work, you and your mom are always my first priority." By late summer, Blackwell Enterprises had turned a corner. The stock price was recovering, new financial controls were in place, and the worst of the crisis had passed. On a warm August evening, the Blackwell family hosted a small gathering in their backyard. Richard was there, along with Dr. Chen, who had relocated to Chicago to join the medical board of the soon-to-launch Blackwell Family Foundation. Noah's teacher, Ms. Johnson, had also been invited, along with a few close friends Sarah had made, since moving back to the States. As the sun began to set, Ethan called for everyone's attention. With Sarah and Noah by his side, he made an announcement. "Today marks two important milestones," he began. "First, as of this morning, Douglas Reynolds has officially resumed his role as CEO of Blackwell Enterprises. My temporary return has ended." Their guests applauded, and Richard raised his glass in a toast. "Second," Ethan continued, "the Blackwell Family Foundation has received its final approval and will begin operations next month." More applause followed, especially from Dr. Chen, who would be advising on the medical programs. "But there's a third piece of news that's even more important," Sarah added, exchanging a meaningful look with Ethan. "At least, to us." Noah stepped forward, unable to contain his excitement any longer. "I'm going to be a big brother," he announced proudly. "Mom's having a baby." The yard erupted in cheers and congratulations. As their friends surrounded them with hugs and well wishes, Ethan pulled Sarah close. "Are you happy?" he whispered in her ear. "Happier than I ever thought possible," she replied, tears of joy shining in her eyes. Later that night, after their guests had departed and Noah had gone to bed, Ethan and Sarah sat in the nursery they had secretly begun preparing. The walls were painted a soft yellow, waiting to be decorated for the little girl who would join their family in about 6 months. "I never thought I'd have this," Ethan admitted, looking around the room. "A complete family. A purpose beyond work." "I never thought I'd have this much time," Sarah replied softly, placing a hand on her still flat stomach. "When I was diagnosed, all I could think about was Noah growing up without me. That's why I finally sent him to find you." "The letter that changed everything," Ethan murmured, remembering that fateful day when a small boy had handed him a crumpled envelope. "I was so afraid you'd reject him," Sarah admitted, "that you'd think it was some kind of scam." "The moment I looked into his eyes, I knew," Ethan said. "He has my father's chin, my eyes. But more than that, there was a connection I can't explain." Sarah rested her head on his shoulder. "Life has a way of coming full circle, doesn't it? You left because your career was everything to you. And now look where we are." "I was so wrong back then," Ethan said. "But maybe we both needed to grow to become the people we are now before we could make this work." "Maybe," Sarah agreed. "Or maybe we just needed Noah to bring us back together." A soft knock at the door interrupted their conversation. Noah stood, so there in his dinosaur pajamas, looking sheepish. "I couldn't sleep," he explained. "I keep thinking about the baby. Do you think she'll like me?" "She's going to adore you," Sarah assured him, making room for him to join them in the rocking chair. "And you're going to be the best big brother ever," Ethan added, ruffling Noah's hair. As the three of them sat together in the quiet nursery, planning and dreaming of the future, Ethan reflected on the incredible journey that had brought them to this moment. From a lonely, work-obsessed man to a husband and father with another child on the way. From a corporate titan focused solely on profit to the founder of a foundation dedicated to helping others. From a life that looked successful on the outside but was empty within to one overflowing with love and purpose, all because of a letter. A simple handwritten letter delivered by a brave little boy who hadn't given up on the father he'd never known. The next morning, while Sarah and Noah were still sleeping, Ethan went to his home office and opened his desk drawer. The letter was there, carefully preserved in a frame. He read it again, as he had countless times over the past year. "Dear Mr. Blackwell, I don't want money. I don't want toys. I just want to know why you left us. Mom got sick, and she said you were too busy to care. She said you didn't want a family, but I still think about you, and I still hope one day you'll come back. I don't hate you, I just miss you. With love, your son." Those simple words had awakened something long dormant in Ethan's heart, the capacity to love unconditionally, to put others before himself, to recognize what truly mattered in life. He placed the frame on his desk, where he could see it every day. A reminder of how quickly life could change, how precious family was, how a second chance could come when least expected. Outside, the sun was rising over Chicago, bathing their home in golden light. Ethan heard movement upstairs. Sarah and Noah, Waking up, beginning another day together. His family, his heart, his life. The letter had changed everything, but the story it began was still being written, one day at a time, with love on every page. 3 months later, the Blackwell Family Foundation opened its doors. Located in a renovated building near the hospital where Sarah had received her initial treatment, it was a warm, welcoming space designed to support families in crisis. On opening day, Ethan stood at the podium, looking out at the gathered crowd of supporters, medical professionals, and most importantly, families who would benefit from their services. When my son Noah handed me a letter nearly 2 years ago, I had no idea how it would transform my life, Ethan began. I was a man who thought success could be measured in dollars and deals. I was wrong. Sarah stood nearby, her pregnancy now visible with Noah proudly at her side. True success isn't what you acquire, Ethan continued. It's what you give back. It's the love you share and the lives you touch. Today we open this foundation with a simple mission: to help families stay together and stay strong during the most challenging times of their lives. As Ethan cut the ribbon and officially opened the foundation's doors, he caught Sarah's eye. Her smile, radiant, loving, filled with promise for their future, told him everything he needed to know. He had finally found his way home, not to a place, but to the people who made life worth living. And it had all begun with a letter, a child's plea that had opened a man's heart and changed everything forever. Noah ran to him as the ceremony concluded, taking both his hand and Sarah's. "We did it, Dad. We really did it." "Yes, we did, son," Ethan agreed, looking from Noah to Sarah, feeling his heart swell with gratitude and love. Together. In that moment, surrounded by the family he had almost lost and the future they were building together, Ethan knew with absolute certainty that no success in business could ever compare to this. The simple, profound joy of being exactly where he was meant to be with the people he was meant to love. The letter had changed everything, and everything had changed for the better.